Welcome to Coping with Chaos, Messages from a Dyslexic with ADHD. I'm here today with my partner, Brai.
Hi.
My name is Sarah. My pronouns are she, her, and I work for the graduate school. So my primary job is to help graduate students with time management, productivity, publication, grant writing, research projects, things like that. So if you have any questions for me, you can stick around after, or you can always send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat right now. And so I'm gonna just let Brai introduce themselves really quickly too.
Hi, my name is Brai Schwandt. They, them, their pronouns. I am an electronics engineer. I got my master's degree from the Technical University of Aachen in Germany, specializing in power electronics. I work on electric vehicle motor controllers for a company in Longmont called Danfoss. And yeah, So I have not been like officially diagnosed with dyslexia or ADHD, but I've, have received like the unofficial diagnosis from a psychiatrist and have dealt with struggling with reading, struggling with the school system, basically education, and kind of finding my own unique ways to survive in the midst of chaos, which can be kind of described as normal life in a certain sense as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Brai. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So the reason why I invited Brai to join us on this webinar today is because I'm very type A. I think in a very linear fashion. And many of you have talked to me or you've been to a lot of my programming before, and you know that I think in a very structured way, and I often coach my students in that way as well. Of course, being open to alternative ways of thinking and being and doing, but that's just what works well for me, is to have a very structured lifestyle, to kind of plan everything out, schedule everything out, have everything be very time-based. Like, okay, I'm going to work on this thing for 30 minutes today, and then I'm going to do this at 4:30 p.m. or whatever. And during COVID, I moved in with Brai, and I was kind of blown away by how different they think and how different they work and move through the world. But also, I started stealing their strategies, and it was really helpful for me. And so I realized that doing some of these things that Bri does a lot, such as making sure to take naps, slow transitions between tasks, I found that it helped me as well, even though I didn't necessarily think the same way. So I was like, oh, I should do a webinar with my students, because Bri has a lot of really interesting experiences that can help you as well. And I know also I work with a lot of students who are in the Gretchen Rubin spectrum. They're rebels, and Bri is also a rebel. And I often don't know how to coach those students because I'm not a rebel and I don't understand it. And so I think Bri has some valuable things to say. So it's gonna kind of be an interview format, and I'm just gonna ask Bri some questions, and then we'll have time for Q&A after. So feel free to put questions in the chat during the presentation, and then we'll look at the questions in the chat after and answer them. Or you can wait until after and you can verbally say your question as well. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we got started?
No, sounds good.
Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm just gonna put the video like a little bit closer to you, Bri.
Okay.
Because this isn't about me. This is about you.
All right.
So, you shared with me some of your experiences growing up in the school system. Um, that was really inspiring for me to hear about, just the ways that you were kind of felt um, like you were categorized in a certain way. So, can you share a little bit about that experience and then how you found your way in engineering?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, really young, I was put into, it was pretty clear even to myself at that young of an age that I was not being put into like the smart group. They separated us out into three different reading groups, like red, orange, and
Mm.
yellow. And red had this big book with lots of words, and then orange was like a medium-sized book with like, you know, and then the yellow book was like this tiny little book. And like we like, I feel like I
Mm.
looked around and I was like, okay, I get what's going on here. Like clearly I'm not one of the smart people here. And I think I started to internalize that, uh, getting into like second, third grade, and I was put into special education. So I was taken out of the classroom, brought to a special room where I was basically doing the same material, but just at a way slower pace. And I hated that. Like I actually at that age like fought against it and was, went to my mom and was like, I need to go back into class with my friends. Like I'm way behind. This is stupid. It's not my fault
Mm-hmm.
that I'm way behind everybody. And so I did get put back into class. I was a lot slower than everybody. I was always the last person done taking tests, and I didn't get good grades in any class, like not even math. Everybody says like, oh yeah, you're an engineer, you must be math, like strong in that. And I wasn't, not until like algebra when I hit seventh grade. And in high school, when things kind of got a little bit more on your own, I think I started to do a little bit better. And I got progressively better as I got older. Um, but there was kind of just for me like an understanding, like I'm not going to ever be like the smartest person in the class, or at least that's what I thought to myself. I sort of
Mm.
detached myself from like grades in particular, and just like I didn't get any validation from like a good grade or something like that. I just wanted to try to learn as best I could, and it was pretty clear that the way I learned was different than everybody else's way.
I just want to touch base with everyone. Is that, and you don't have to necessarily say in the chat or anything, but just think to yourself or say in the chat, like, is that relatable to anyone else? Like, do other people have this experience? Yeah, completely. Someone said,
Yeah,
yeah. So people are sharing your experience a little
I
bit.
think it was really stressful. Like, and eventually I just like had to like detach myself from this whole grading system and the way that it worked, and kind of just focus on learning, which was different for different classes, right? Like I could do calculus or physics without even having to like read the book or even think about it. I didn't even have to pay attention in class, which I started to realize was my strength. Whereas like, grammar, I still don't understand grammar. Like I took every single grammar test, like, does this sound good to me? And, so essentially I got like B's or C's, which was fine for me. Reading like things like Shakespeare, I couldn't read Shakespeare. Like I just didn't read Shakespeare. I would read the Cliff Notes online to try to figure it out, or watch like the movie version of it or something like that.
So, how did you bring some of these experiences into grad school? Like, for example, in grad school, grades aren't important as much
Yeah.
anymore. Like, how did you start to like bring some of these strengths and traits and mindsets into your graduate school experience?
So grad school, so I went to grad school in Germany firstly. So like they have a very, everything is extremely individual. Like it's all on you to figure things out. And it's all theoretical. So there's less practical, like hands-on, like tinkering with things. And so I still completely detached from the grade. I did pretty well in most of my classes. I got like D minuses in some that I would have expected I would have done well in. But ultimately, like, I think getting into like test taking is a whole aspect to where like learning how to, yeah, like learning a certain type of material, it was just, like you were saying, you like have schedules and stuff like that. Like mine, I never had schedules. It was just like, I have a test coming up, everything is dedicated towards, all of my energy is like focused on this test. And I allowed myself to socialize, but for like a whole chunk of the day, I would just, everything was centered around studying. And I would take breaks when someone asked me to do something else. Like, so that was kind of that's been my strategy my entire educational career, is just full on studying all the time until someone says, "Hey, do you want to go to the park and have a beer or something like that?" And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, sure. Like I need a break. That's great." Or I would also like, anytime I highly value playing for myself. Like playing guitar is a huge stress relief. And so I would, anytime I really wanted to start playing guitar, I would just allow myself to play guitar. And sometimes I would play guitar for 4 hours. And then I'd be done playing guitar and I'd be like, oh, great. Now I'll go back to studying. Like that was a nice break. And so there was never any like good schedule until I got to my master's thesis. And
Wait, let's talk
go ahead.
more before we move on to that, because I want to hear about that. Can you talk more about how you experience and deal with, or how you maximize your ability to not have a schedule? Like kind of this idea of being like a little bit more free, like a little bit more rebellious in your scheduling and in your time. I think that's really valuable.
How do I do that? Or
yeah. So like in addition to the guitar, like you had mentioned to me, I think at work you often take walks outside.
yeah, I
Stuff
try
like
to.
that.
Yeah, I try to. I think this is fun, just like something I've learned about myself. Like I need to get outside. I need to be in the sun. I need to have some level of physical exercise just to kind of release some of that energy that I think I feel when I get like pent up in an office or in my room or whatever. So I would just, I've always just highly prioritized doing some sort of physical exercise, and I can tell when I forget to do that, which happens like when I'm in the midst of something extremely all-encompassing, like master's thesis, or right now work has been crazy, and so trying to like come up with some method to like shut off that part of the brain and take a break. And like running does really well for me, but also like, yeah, basically any physical exercise.
Cool.
Yeah.
I want to pause this discussion really quick. I also want you to see people are saying in the chat. This is something they've also experienced. And someone also said, I just want to say I'm so happy that this discussion is happening. So
Yeah.
people are excited.
Good.
I also wanted to like get some feedback from the students actually too. So Brai mentioned sometimes needing to just stop and play the guitar for a while, just for as long as they feel like, and then get back to their work later. Does anyone else want to share a similar experience, or in the chat or verbally, or share other kinds of strategies that they've used that are kind of similar to that? Maybe not playing the guitar, but maybe art of some kind or some other sort of creative activity that they've used that has helped for them. Okay, so
Should
we
I
have
answer this one?
I'm gonna let the students.
Okay.
Oh, do you have another strategy? Oh, you want to
No,
answer this
the specific
question?
question right there.
Yeah, what do you think of that question?
I guess the question is, how do I stop myself from taking a break? If we have deadlines we want to avoid, how do you also not feel like you're wasting time? I guess I try not to think about things as like wasting time so much. And I try not to think about well, like, deadlines are an interesting thing that add chaos to your life, and I
Yeah.
understand that they're necessary. And I had a 6-month deadline on my master's thesis, and I know that, like, for everybody it was like, oh my god, like, that once I start that 6-month time clock, like, stress jumps through the roof. And I tried to think about it more as just like, I did have like a goal of like every single morning, because should I talk about my master's
Yeah,
thesis?
so let's talk about the master's thesis. But I do want to emphasize what Brai said, which I think is really important. And that's the reason why I brought Brai on this webinar, is to kind of change our mindset a little bit. So change our mindset a little bit around deadlines, change our mindset a little bit around the words wasting time, and this idea of like, how do you stop yourself from taking a break? I think what Bri is saying is like, you don't stop yourself from taking a break. Like,
Yeah.
if you need to take a break, take a break.
Yeah.
And that those creative activities that you do, whether it's guitar or drawing,
Yeah,
that they're actually necessary. So I think that was the thing that kind of blew my mind the most about time management in living with Bri, is that like taking these breaks, it seems like you're wasting time in a sense. So for example, Bri takes 2 naps a day usually. And for me at first I was like,
usually is a strong statement.
Okay, sometimes.
I take 1 nap a day usually, and 2 naps if I'm lucky.
Okay,
Basically.
2 naps if you're lucky. But at first I was like, oh my gosh, this is like taking time out of your workday. But it actually made me more efficient because my brain was working more efficiently on the nap rather than just trying to plow through it. So there's that. So we have some more questions coming in. We're gonna answer them after though. Well, let's answer them after. Let's go to the master's thesis question, which is, so once you do have this very important deadline, so part of it is, okay, let's be a little bit flexible about our deadlines. Like I know with your work, like sometimes you like can't meet deadlines, and that's fine. Like you just have to tell your team like, this is an unrealistic deadline.
I've been telling my team that, like, right now I'm managing a team developing the next version of our motor controller, and I just keep on telling people like, yeah, I know we're all stressed, this is terrible, these deadlines are unrealistic, like, and I don't know if I'm doing something that's bad on that. Like, my manager probably wouldn't like me saying that, but we're going to miss these deadlines, and I'm not going to compromise because, yeah, if my health, like my mental health starts to tank, that's not going to be good for the project. It's not going to be good for anybody. And I notice when I start trying to move too fast and I start making mistakes. And that happened to me this week. They wanted to push something out by this Friday. And it was like, we need to have this done by this Friday. And it was only supposed to be like 2 hours of work, but then it turned out to be my primary focus for like 2 weeks because nothing ever goes as planned. And I think it's during those times when you act like you want to like boundaries are extremely important for me, with my job, or with like myself, with school. It's like, these are the times where I need to be taking more breaks, or need to be taking like more time to play guitar or go on a run. And it definitely slips, and it's definitely something that I feel like I can't keep up like perfectly. But I try, like, I just put it at like a really high value. Like I take a nap after work, basically it's almost meditative, like, or it is meditative, like to take a nap right after work and kind of get myself out of that mindset and into like the mindset of like, yeah, it's the evening, I'm going to do what I want to do. I mean, that's your right. Like, you should, and it's your right if you give it to yourself. Like, a lot of people, and especially in America, I think like Europeans are better at this, and I think I learned a lot by being over there. But you have the right to like take your own time. You don't have to dedicate your entire life to work. So
Yeah, that's a really good point. So one of the things that Brai is emphasizing here is that you can advocate for yourself and say either this deadline is unrealistic or I can't make this deadline, can we discuss an extension? And
or you can,
it's not worth compromising your mental health
yeah,
for this arbitrary external deadline. And so embracing some of that.
Yeah, and I think it's yeah, it's hard to advocate for yourself. And like, I think especially like, it doesn't really help, I don't think, in my opinion, to like, mention like any sort of neurodiversity or like, because then I don't know, unless you really want to like be breaking out like diagnoses or getting a diagnosis or doing these types of things, like, to me, I think it's more try to find the sneaky little loopholes through the system. And that's like the way that I feel like I've gotten through everything. It's like, I never asked for extra time on tests, or I never asked for like, but it's, trying to like connect with the teacher individually, trying to connect with HR or like my supervisor and say like, yeah, I like to take time like once in the morning, once in the afternoon to go off and meditate, or to go off and like be on my own, like have a little bit of time alone, like where people can't come get me. And that's usually when I go to the unused part of the building. I literally like lie down underneath a desk in a cube, and I like hide for like 20 minutes. And I do that, yeah, fairly religiously, like, because I'm not great. I never was great at like praying every day either. But like, that's the point, is like, religiously doesn't mean you're doing it perfectly. I'm trying to do it like, because I know it's valuable for me.
I really like that advice. Like, this isn't about, and that's why like this webinar is not for people who find themselves on any neurodiverse spectrum. It's for everyone, because no matter what kind of neurodiversity you have a right to ask for these things, and it's not about getting a diagnosis or not. I really like that idea.
Yeah, and I mean, like, so I've like read a bit about dyslexia and ADHD and like the things that people with dyslexia and ADHD need, and it's like exercise, sleep, like, yeah, and I'm you read through it and you're just like, everybody needs this, but apparently people with ADHD or dyslexia like need it more. And which makes me sort of feel sorry for the people that don't need it, because I've always gotten time in nature. It doesn't matter where I've lived. It doesn't matter where like, I've just always had that need to go out into.
Sorry, we have some trucks coming by. I think can everyone still hear?
Hopefully.
Okay. Just keep talking.
But yeah, I guess I'll transition a little bit into like the strategy that I ended up using in my master's thesis.
Yeah, so when you do have a deadline that is pretty firm deadline, and it really does start to take over your life, how do you deal with that?
So my master's thesis was like all encompassing. It was a good solid like 6 months of my life, maybe definitely more, just in terms of like getting everything prepped. And then I set that 6-month deadline. And my goal was, so I mean, when people give me a deadline that seems tight, I like immediately make a mental note that like, okay, they're giving me this deadline. That means I need to give them the best that I can do within this deadline. Like, and I set my expectations based on that deadline. Like, for example, this last these last 2 weeks at work, they gave me 2 weeks to get this thing out and through the door. And that means I can't do the high levels of testing that I want to do. I can't think fully through like all the design changes that I need to make. So fundamentally, they're basically, by giving me a really tight, inflexible deadline, they're basically telling me they want an inferior product, which is kind of, I just kind of take that off of myself and put that on them. Because as like, and this is like to get around like the whole, I'm not a perfectionist. I've never struggled with being a perfectionist. Like, and part of it is that I've never done anything perfectly. So I can accept that something I send out might have some mistakes. I've made mistakes that end up costing thousands of dollars to like repair, weeks of like fixing it. And it's hard to not be hard on myself and just, put myself down and be like, how did I make these mistakes? But at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, if I look back at what I was doing at that time, I didn't have the time to do the best job I could. It's like a test. If you're taking a calc exam or something like that, you don't have time to check all your work all the time. Like, you just do the best you can, you put down what you can, and you move on. And that's the way I entered into my master's thesis. Like, okay, I've got 6 months to do this. How do I want to make sure that I'm working towards the goal? What are my goals? Like, fundamentally, I need to have some sort of thing to give to them to show them that I've done something, which is the write-up I had. So, I looked at the requirements of like how many pages, what type of thing, and I actually wrote down all of the requirements that I understood, and I presented them in a meeting to my supervisor and the professor, and I was like, is this what we're all agreeing to? And everybody agreed, and I had like a rough timeline kind of laid out. And then after that, it was just, for me, it was setting aside a certain period of time where I knew that I could do the most important thing, which in this case was writing the master's thesis. And then also I was building a little device, so I had to basically get that thing working. So I had essentially two main tasks, which was write and build. So I portioned out my day around my naps, basically. So I had a nap in the morning, a nap in the later afternoon. So I would wake up, first thing I would do, with like a massive coffee, I would basically, I would just write for the first few hours of the day, and write until I basically couldn't write anymore. And then I would take a break. Germany was always cloudy and rainy. So anytime it was sunny, I had a rule where I would stop whatever I was doing and I'd go on a run or go outside and enjoy the weather.
I like that rule.
Yeah, it became like my saving grace. It's like, oh, it's sunny, so drop whatever thing I'm doing. I go outside. But I tried to basically portion out my day around these naps, where after the nap I'd go to lunch and then I'd go into the lab and I'd work on my project. And after the project, I'd take another nap and do a run or exercise. And like, so it ended up being that like this time was focused on this task, this time was focused on this task. And then after the last one, I would focus on basically my own personal needs, which were like socializing and exercise and like kind of stress relief and stuff. It's not to say that I didn't ever do like it's scattered quite a bit, but that was kind of like the structure that I went around, and I definitely had a lot of flexibility.
So then you were flexible within that. Can you talk a little bit about how you were? Okay, yeah, can you talk a little bit more about how the flexibility you allowed yourself within that?
Basically, if something else was a super high priority at that time, like even if it was like I had a lot of momentum on writing, for instance, I would continue that momentum.
So like, let's say you had a good writing session that morning, if you were really feeling momentum, you wouldn't go to the lab that day.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't go to the lab that day.
Were there days that you didn't write as well?
Yeah, there was, and I would go straight to the lab, work at the
Okay.
lab. I mean, there's days too where it's not to, like, I don't want to point out any of this saying like I was super healthy. Like, in a lot of these times of my life, like I'm not necessarily particularly healthy. Like I miss meals, or like end up forgetting to go grocery shopping or something and end up with like a plate of rice at the end of the day. It's still, I think anybody else looking into my life during that time would have been very perplexed that it was even possible to do that, because I would wake up super early, I'd work on something. Sometimes, yeah, like I would stop working, I'd play guitar in the middle of the day randomly, or I would just like, it definitely felt like I was kind of following whatever felt like my rhythm was. But just having like, kind of thinking in terms of like 4 to 6 hour increments in between these naps, like really helped me partition and say like, okay, I've got 4 to like hours right now. What do I want to focus on in this 4 hours? And
would you generally focus on one thing?
Yeah, with 4 hours, you really only have time to focus, and I only have time to focus on one thing. So it would just be one thing for that 4 to 6 hours. And I would get as far as I got, and then I would kind of move on to the next thing. Yeah.
Cool.
So
what else did you discover during your master's thesis? Were slow transitions something that you did during that time? Or was that
slow transitions, yeah. I mean, I just naturally do slow transitions. Like
Can you describe a little bit about what that looks like for you?
Like I did a lot of like long lunches with friends, like, so going out to lunch with friends, getting a coffee afterwards, like enjoying that like reprieve from the day, basically. A lot of the times I ended up like working straight into the evening, and then wouldn't make myself dinner, and then if people wanted to go hang out later that night or something, because that was we would often go out and get beers or whatever, and so I would just work straight until that point, and then I would basically combine hanging out and eating. But like, yeah, the reason I would wake up and start working on my like writing right away is because if I didn't start writing, I would get into something else and I would have to transition into writing. And just that process of getting myself into writing is a little bit of a process. Like, just, I think that's like what I mean by transition, like getting myself into the next thing out of the last one takes a lot of time, like 20 to 30 minutes or something, which is why naps help. Like, if it's going to take me 20 to 30 minutes to get out of this thing and get into the next one, I might as well like kind of treat it as a meditation. And someone's asking what I mean by naps. Like, basically what I mean by a nap is I go and I lie down in one position. I don't move. I close my eyes, I get comfortable, and I just lie there for 20 minutes. Sometimes I fall asleep, sometimes I don't. And what happens is I go through an interesting process of basically letting whatever is in my mind kind of go. And it goes for anywhere from 2 to 20 minutes. Like, sometimes I don't nap at all. Sometimes it just ends up being my mind's just reeling for 20 minutes. And after the 20 minutes, my alarm goes off, I get up, and then I go to the next thing or whatever.
Cool.
So
that's super helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like, the reason I started doing the naps as well is because I don't struggle with insomnia per se or anything. I've never like had trouble sleeping, but I struggle with prioritizing sleep during times of high stress. Like
Mm.
during my bachelor's degree, when I was doing my senior project, I slept very little, like 4 hours a night, maybe. And I tend to do that sometimes. And so I read about, it's, unclear the way that like sleeping's an interesting thing. Like I find it to, because I've dealt with like sleep deprivation in my past, like it's a very interesting thing to read about. And sleeping is extremely important. We understand that, but like how people sleep is a little bit more subject to
The unknown.
the unknown. And because I knew I was getting into a point where I probably wouldn't be sleeping well, there's a thing called polyphasic sleeping. I'm sure some people have heard of it, but it's where you basically take naps throughout the day, and rather than sleeping once all night, you sleep multiple times. And I kind of know about myself that if I want to feel good all day, I need to sleep like 9 hours. And that is just not sustainable in this world. And this is where, like, how do I cope with the chaos of life? Like, this was a very difficult problem for me. Like, okay, how am I going to, one, do this master's thesis, and two, how am I going to get into the world and like have a social life and like get enough sleep and work? And naps like became kind of my personal experiment. And people in Germany and in Europe nap a lot more than I had ever experienced. And it was pretty clear that it was working for them. So I wanted to try it for myself. And so I found that by doing like a 20-minute nap, that almost like hedged my bet against like losing an hour and a half of sleep. Like a 20-minute nap for me was enough to like basically cover the loss of sleep that I missed. And I know like no sleep doctor is ever going to like get behind that or anything, but for me it helped, and it still helps. Like I sleep like 6 hours a night, and I get 1 or 2 naps, and I feel pretty good. And I take a nap basically if I feel myself getting really tired. Like I'll just stop what I'm doing and I'll go and I'll take a nap.
Cool. That is so awesome.
Yeah, it's
all right.
It's helpful.
So the last thing, we'll do Q&A in a second. The last thing I was wondering if you could talk about bullet journals and how you use them and why they're helpful for you.
Yeah. So I use a bullet journal.
For those of you that don't know, bulletjournal.com, but there are like these, well, you can describe it maybe for people who don't know what a bullet journal is.
Well, so a bullet journal is just a method of basically journaling. For me, I'm not much of a note taker. I never took notes through college. I think that's part of like dyslexia. Like I can't listen and take notes at the same time. And so note taking, keeping a schedule, like these types of things have never been easy for me. But the bullet journal method is kind of like a running method of like organizing your life, where you'll every single month you'll kind of lay out your month. You'll lay out the things that you need to do, and then you'll kind of just put down your notes as you're going throughout the day, and it'll just run. There's no structure to it. It's just a continuous journal. You do indexing and this sort of thing, which for me it was a method that taught me how to journal, like, and how to keep notes. And the reason I started doing that is because I needed one central location to do my note taking, because working on like a digital platform, like I really like OneNote, for instance. I've used like Google Docs, I've used all kinds of different things, but my notes are so chaotic. They're everywhere. Like if someone wanted to write a biography of my life, they'd have like a hell of a time just like finding like, okay, why in the world do they have this over there, and I have no idea. Like, because in that moment when I was like, where should I put this? I was like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll like create like another subfolder or something. And so, or I'll make another, like I continuously would like start new things. The bullet journal is, I like it because it gets me away from my phone, which is a huge distraction for the most, like in a lot of ways. It's also useful in a lot of ways. Like I use it to help me, like to remind me of important things. Like, but I don't want to be using it to like set my schedule. For like, I got into using Google Calendar, and that was, for me, it was terrible. Like having to have like a specific start date or start time. Like, okay, we're gonna meet at 7 p.m. on a Friday night. I'm like, now I'm stressing about 7 p.m. Friday night. I'm just like, oh my God. Whereas if I write in my bullet journal, like I noticed that when I was scheduling things with people or trying to like schedule things that I wanted to do, I wouldn't put a time to anything. It was like, oh, hey, I'm going to go meet up with this person early afternoon. And for me, that just like feels more flexible and fits into my life better. Like, as opposed to, okay, from 6 to 7, I'm going to see this person. And then from 7 to 8, I'm going to see that person, or I'm going to do this. I'm going to have that call. That works when it's work because we have to do meetings and stuff like that. But I didn't want my life feeling like that, basically. So I think that's been a huge, huge thing. And I do it. It's all on paper. Basically, it's a notebook. You open it up and then you start. You make an index where you'll reference like different things that you kind of do. So like if something's like continuously coming up in my life, like for instance, like songwriting or something like that, like I just create a page where I write like a new song, and then I've got a page where I'm going to put my new song. So like that helps me prioritize that I want to do a new song. Like, so by creating the page in my bullet journal kind of shows like, all right, I've got a place where I can put my thoughts and stuff. Or if I've have a ton of like stuff, like housework to do around the house, I'll make like, okay, housework, new page, and then I'll put like all the things that I want to do.
But so that helped you with flexible scheduling, which was important for you. And
yeah, the flexible scheduling thing is like a necessity for my life. Like I can't have like my work, even like work, like 9 to 5. First of all, I don't know any, like, I don't, like 9 to 5 is not a real thing. It's like 8 to 5 is a real thing in my like world, but usually it ends up being like 7 to 6:30, like for me. So
even how do earlier than that, like sometimes you wake up at 4:30.
Yeah, sometimes I wake up at 4:30.
And then you get some stuff done, then you'll take breaks.
Yeah, so like my ideal day, Sarah got to see some of my ideal days, like when she was living with me. And basically like I would wake up at like 4:30, somewhere around there, like drag myself out of bed, get like started on the main thing that I wanted to work on that day so that I could build a little bit of momentum and then carry that throughout the rest of the day. But once I kind of started a little bit of momentum, that made me feel good. But then I also like wanted to get a workout in. I wanted to eat breakfast, so I'd take a break after that. And then when everybody else was coming to work, I'd kind of rejoin. And so for me, like getting a little bit of like a work-life balance doesn't look like, okay, from 8 to 5, I do work. And then from 5 to 9, I live and then I sleep. I take breaks randomly throughout the day, which is working great when I'm working from home. Like I have my guitar here, and part of me has wondered, like, if I ever do go back to the office, can I bring a guitar to work? Like, would that be weird? Or just to have something to give myself a little bit of a break.
Yeah, cool. So you like intersperse sleeping and work and play throughout the day. It's not like these divided sections.
Yeah, I still try to make sure that like weekends are my time, not dedicated to work. But yeah, it's hard because work, yeah, I mean, it's the majority of like my life during the week, and it feels good to stay on top of things. So that's where my phone has come in really handy. Like I do have all of my work emails coming to my phone. I do have like reminders coming to my phone. People can contact me through my phone, like, which is not something everybody else does. But for me, it helps me feel like I'm have more flexibility. Like I don't need to be in front of my computer in order to do work. Like I can kind of keep up with emails as we're going, or as the day is kind of going, which is helpful for me, I think, partially, I think, because of the dyslexia. Like it's hard for me to like sit down and read every word of an email. Like I don't even know if I do that. And so having the emails kind of coming in, and so that I can kind of be aware of what's going on, even after hours. Like last night I got an email at like 7 o'clock that, again, this unit, this thing that we're trying to ship out today, was like, yay, it finally passed. So I had a to-do item that I needed to get done immediately after we passed testing. So I just did it last night. It took me about a half hour, and I wasn't planning on doing that, but it kind of made it so that I didn't have to worry about it the next morning. So that balance is something that's, it's never right? Balancing is something that, sometimes I don't get the proper balance. And these last few weeks have been like, I haven't gotten as much exercise as I would necessarily like. I've done pretty good on like getting my naps in after work and stuff, but I'm only getting one nap a day. So yeah.
All right, cool. Well, let's start with some of the questions.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's go to the top. So I'm just gonna start with the first one. After. Okay.
Oh, the Pomodoro, I saw someone mention that. I did try that. I don't know. It maybe works, but it didn't really work for me.
Yeah.
Because I would do like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then I'd be like in such a mindset, in the zone. It was good to help me get into it, like something, but I eventually kind of went away from that method.
Okay. So we have another question here. I have ADHD and bipolar. I can't work on anything if my mental health is compromised. I make feeling okay a prerequisite to working, so I don't feel bad when I don't accomplish what I want. Can you call about or talk about mood in relationship to your experiences?
Yeah, so
that's a good question.
That is a good question. Mood it's something that I definitely like. I remember like during my master's thesis, I was like, there's so much going on. I was doing a lot. I remember going to one of my friends and I was just like, do you guys ever just get super bored with life? Yeah. Just in general, like life is boring. And I think that's when I was like, I didn't have the words or understanding of my own like mental health. But when I said that, it was kind of surprising to myself to like even hear myself saying this, like, but my friends, they responded, they're like, no, I don't. And I was just like, damn, like, why not? And I think I've found out since, like, that's more of an ADHD thing, like, to like struggle with boredom, to like I have a lot of the time have like an underlying irritability, like frustration. And I think it's trying to recognize that mood. And I feel like when I'm in that type of mood or mindset, like that's when I need to get the break. I need to take like time out in nature. I need to like play guitar. I need to do something else. And otherwise, yeah, I'm just bored and I'm not getting anything done. I'm frustrated and I'm like, just like spinning my wheels basically. So that's where I think balancing and getting that time off is good.
So recognizing, allowing, and then taking a break.
Yeah.
Okay. One person is saying like they're super distracted because they have ADHD, so without a deadline, it's too hard to focus.
Yeah, I need deadlines too.
Yeah.
It's
but it's like having the deadline, but recognizing that the deadline is and can be flexible.
Yeah, it's always flexible. I mean it, and flexibility in terms of, yeah, like if it's a test, for instance, yeah, you're not flexible on the date of that, but you know, having a little bit of acceptance that, yeah, I'm not going to be an expert on this just by taking a test. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to study, I'm going to get as much information as I can, and then I'm going to take the test, and whatever happens, happens.
So one of the questions is, sometimes there are so many things to do that even starting makes me too anxious to start. How do you overcome that?
Starting is the hardest part. Like, I think of it as kind of like going on a run, like, which I'm using as a metaphor. Like, to me, like the first mile of a run is like the worst part, because it's just like, oh God, is this happening? Like, do I have to do this? Like, I even, like, for me, I've always said, like, the hardest part of my day is getting out of bed. Like, so if I've gotten out of bed, like, I've already achieved the hardest thing that's gonna, like, I'm gonna do. So I could kind of give myself a pat on the back for that. But yeah, starting a task is extremely difficult, and like, that's where I just try to start something. Like, a lot of the times I'll end up scrapping everything that I have done, whether it's a design, a paper, or like, it's just like, I've tried to get started, and it's not so much the trying to focus on, like, okay, is this content good or perfect? Like, it's just like getting it going.
Cool. That makes sense. So it's okay to just start, even though you know you're going to throw out everything that you're doing, just as long as you get the momentum.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Yeah. How
How do you move off of a break?
Slowly, like, regretfully. I almost feel like sometimes it's like everybody else is like moving off the break, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'll follow suit. Like, I'm like oftentimes the one that's trying to keep everybody like in the break. It's like, no, guys, we don't have to go back to work, do we? It's like it's lunchtime. Let's go on a walk. Like, I try to have as much flexibility with moving off the break as I do moving into the break. Like, I miss breaks. I sometimes, like, am an hour late to, like, finish work and go into, like, my relaxation for the evening. And yeah, sometimes I miss lunch or something like that. And so, to, like, trying to not be hard on myself when I do that, and also trying not to be hard on myself when I'm taking a longer break. Like, time is a stupid thing. Like, I try to not focus on the time. Like, I don't take, like, okay, I'm gonna go take an hour for lunch, and in this hour I need to fit a 20-minute nap, lunch, and a walk or something like that. It's more like, it's lunchtime. These are the three things that I want to do. I want to take a nap, I want to eat, and then I want to take a walk. Like, and that's been a little harder now that I've, like, become a manager and, like, have meetings all the time. But, like, that's where having my phone, for instance, can make things a little bit more flexible. Like, I can listen in, talk in a meeting while I'm cooking or while I'm eating or while I'm walking. Yeah, I can't do it while I'm napping, and that's the beauty of a nap or meditating. Like, both of these things are equally viable options.
To completely shut off and not let anyone interrupt you during those times.
Yeah, right. Like, meditating is essentially giving yourself time to be with yourself, like, and just yourself. And the nap, I think, is kind of the same thing. Yeah.
We have some, these are comments, people just chatting. I'll share them with you later. I'm going to make sure we have time for questions. Yeah, so do you work after? Yeah, you work after 9 to 5. I think you answered that question. Sometimes 4:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m., but with breaks and naps and other things in between.
And that's right. I think I try not to. This has been it's a hard thing, right? Because fundamentally, I want to maximize the amount of time that I'm not working, and work obviously wants me to work all the time. And so I try to take a balanced approach. I try not to think of it as terms of, like, 9 to 5 or even 7 to 7 or anything. Like, I try to think about it in terms of, like, do I feel like I'm getting enough personal time? Like, am I doing the things that I recognize as valuable to my life? Like, like I'll sometimes go months without playing guitar. Like, what's going on? Like, this is obviously not something I want, because I would love to be able to play the guitar every day, and I do play the guitar every day when I'm relaxed and feeling good. So what's going on is something dropped off and out of my life that I value, and if so, yes, I need to just insert it somewhere, whether it's in the workday or not.
I love it. So, how do you maintain your daily habits that are so different from me, the person that you are living with?
Oh yeah, so people like Sarah, they've driven me nuts my entire life. Because I was like, it was because there was so much pressure for me to be like people like Sarah. And it's not to say that like things are easy for Sarah. Like, I recognize that's like school, work, all of these things are hard as well. But for me, I just had, at some point in my life, just got to the point where I was just like, I'm never going to be like, I didn't know Sarah at the time, but like my girlfriend in high school, she was the same type, like just valedictorian, like 35 on the ACT, like all of these sort of things. And it's just like, yeah, that's not me. Never will be. And at that point I didn't understand why, or like I never understood like the dyslexia thing like all the way through high school. So it was just like almost like I think at that point it was like a very somber acceptance. Like, it was like, okay, yeah, like I still don't know what the Merchant of Venice was about. Like, it's like, just is what it is. Like, and like, yeah, so I don't know. That's where I think it's hard, like being like neuro-diverse. Like, you have to kind of just be a little bit different than everybody else, and being a little bit different than everybody else is a little bit of a pain in the ass. So it's fun though.
It's so fun. How do you make sure you keep working when you're not in a high stress, big deadline situation? This is a good question for graduate students, especially PhD students, because they have like 6 years. So they're like dealing with this super long deadline. So they're not, I have a lot of students who have this problem, or not problem, situation.
I sometimes give myself a little bit of a stressful like deadline. Like, at the end of my master's thesis, like I saw my path to completion. So I actually moved my deadline up a little bit and like, gave myself like a stressful situation in order to kind of keep that momentum. It was kind of it's like a false stress. Like, it's not a real deadline. Like, I could take 2 more months or whatever. I could take more time, but if I can see like a path to completion and I know that I can do it, if I set my mind to it, like I will give myself like a false deadline and tell other people that that's what I'm shooting for, so that I have like peer pressure expectations from other people that like know that that's what I'm shooting for and that's what I'm going for. But knowing that it's like a false deadline in my own mind, like it's not actually like, but it is a personal goal, like kind of gives a little bit of the best of both worlds, I guess.
I'm going to skip. So we're getting to be almost 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Do you have to go back to work?
I think I'm okay for a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a little bit of time.
Okay. So we're going to stay on and answer some more of these questions. If you have to go because you have another meeting or something else to do, please feel free. I put my email at the beginning of the chat. So one person was asking for more examples of a bullet journal. So first you can just Google it. It's a whole subculture. They call them bujos. And so you can look it up online, but I'll see, someone was asking specifically for an example from your bullet journal. So maybe I'll take some pictures of it. So if you're interested in seeing like a real example of what Brai is talking about in terms of indexing and such, and you're feeling like you needed an example, I'll send it to the person that asked, but if another person needs it, let me know. But otherwise, check it out, just Google it, and there's a bunch of examples online, right?
Yeah, there's a whole book on it. Yeah.
Oh, there's a book on it. Wow. Okay, cool. So, how do you feel about multitasking?
I don't believe in it. I don't think anybody can do it. And I think that's like been pretty scientifically proven at this point. Like, I think you just like, you do multiple things poorly. And sometimes that's what I do. Like, I'm oftentimes doing multiple things poorly. Is what it is.
But you're just kind to yourself about the fact that this isn't going to be
right. And then like also like if you have the opportunity, like give yourself like time where you're not multitasking to like check over your multitask work, like, and double check and make sure that you did it right and did it well. I think. But yeah, I think for me that was one of the benefits of being in a master's thesis, was I didn't feel like I had to multitask. I was simply working on my thesis, and like everything was going towards the completion of just the master's thesis altogether. Like there was a lot of subtasks, but trying to do them consecutively. I still try to do that with work, but sometimes I'm like in 2 meetings at once.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, we have one last question. So when this person is asking, you talk a lot about social time and like having this team that you work with, having lunch with other people. What if you don't have this kind of social interaction? Like, do you have any insight about that? Is specifically the question. So this person is saying specifically as a grad student, I don't really have that kind of social connection. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, for me, like it's something that I put work to get. Like I put like social time. Socializing it takes work, right? Like I moved to Denver from Germany. I moved to Germany from North Dakota. Like when you move to somewhere new, it's a lot of work to meet new people. It's like networking. It's getting out and finding new people that you can enjoy being around. And so I've always like tried to do that and establish like time out of my day where like this is my job. My job is to go out and meet people.
That's
during
interesting.
during my master's thesis, like I worked at an institute where there was a bunch of other people, PhD engineers, like professors, and it was a bunch of Italians like in my institute, so everybody had like coffee breaks, like to go get an espresso at like 10 o'clock. So trying to like step away and go talk to people at that point, and sometimes it does feel very forced, like like moving to Denver. I think I met you at a time where I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna go do this. Like this is what I gotta do. And yeah,
we met like through a meetup.com group. So I think you're right. Like I remember doing that meetup.com group and being like, these social interactions feel kind of forced, but it took a couple of times, but then it started to become fun.
Yeah.
So meetup.com can be nice.
Yeah, and I think trying to figure out like how you socialize, like if you're introverted versus extroverted. Yeah. This is another.
Obviously, this is different during COVID, but restrictions are being relaxed so much now, especially around open activities. I think that it is fair and reasonable to go out on hikes with other people and things like that.
Yeah. or even, yeah. And you also like socializing with yourself, like is
I like
another
that.
thing to think
Tell us about that.
I mean, I really appreciate having alone time. I really like highly value time where I'm not with other people. Like for me, like playing guitar is a way of like kind of socializing with myself, like reading a book or doing different types of like solo activities that don't require other people are different. It's like a different type of socializing, but like you're being able to just like spend time with yourself, like, and like having some way of like externalizing like your thoughts, like journaling is an example, or but like meditating, like I think of meditating simply as like 20 minutes of being with yourself, like
hanging
not
out with yourself.
yeah, just hanging out, like and so that's something that could be thought of, I think, as socializing, especially like during this COVID time. It's weird. But yeah, a master's thesis is, or a PhD or whatever people end up. I couldn't do a PhD. A master's thesis was like hard enough, but like I had a lot of time where like I would go running and, or like just like time to just like be away from everything that I had to do and just be by myself. And that I consider as like socializing as well.
Cool. Okay. So it's 1:07. How do you feel about seeing if anyone else, some people are hanging around?
If anybody has a question that they want to verbalize, they can
go that. For it.
No questions?
Sometimes it takes a couple.
Comments? I'd be interested in like other people's experience too.
Yeah.
I work at Dan Foss Editron. It's a global company. It's based out of Denmark, and they do manufacturing basically. And I work doing electronics engineering, developing motor controllers for electric vehicles.
Yeah. So, it looks like
naps, right?
Especially for validating the healing power of naps. Brai would like to hear feedback from students. Does anyone want to share their own experience or their own strategies? If you don't have a question. We're gonna hang out for like a minute because I know sometimes it takes a minute for people to. Ooh, this person is saying they teach electrical engineering, chemical engineering for CU Boulder. This is really helpful for both me and my students.
It's good to hear. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, like among engineers, I think it, like I read that like dyslexia is somewhere around like, I think it's like, it's a small percentage of the population. It's like 5% or something like that. But among engineers, it's like 25% of engineers have dyslexia. And it's
so interesting.
Yeah. Like I don't think I could have gotten through I don't think I would have done well if I wasn't in engineering. Like engineering is very well suited for someone who doesn't have to read things. Like or reads differently, I guess, maybe.
Reads differently, yeah.
So
oh, okay. Tana is saying that they have a difficult time breaking up their day. How would you?
I think for me, like, I think about it like, yeah, because like I essentially need like 4 hours of time dedicated to like one task to feel like I'm being productive on that task. And so I think about it in that way, like of, you know, and if I needed more time, I would take that 20-minute break and then come back to it. So I definitely feel the same way. Like I need a lot more time. I can't do like an hour here, hour there.
Yeah, so, like I switch between tasks every 20 minutes sometimes.
Yeah. And that's just me. Yeah, I only do that if it's like, if I'm putting out fires, basically.
I love that. Yes. The power of neurodivergence is recognizing that we're all different and organizing our day around our own needs. Absolutely. And every day is different. Okay.
Yeah, doodling to ramp up to a task.
I
Could
like
see
that.
that.
I like doodling.
Yeah.
Or drawing of some kind when trying to ramp up
Yeah.
to a task. I like
Yeah,
that. Thanks for sharing that.
I'm off. Like I actually like had my guitar in my office like at one point and would find myself picking it up, playing guitar while I thought about the next task.
Okay. Set a 20-minute timer to ramp up. I like that. After 20 minutes, if it doesn't work, you can stop.
Yeah.
That's the mindset. I like
Nice.
that.
Okay, so there's a question about like how to use dyslexia to your advantage. So I would recommend the book, The Dyslexic Advantage. So dyslexia comes in 4 different types essentially. Dyslexic people have advantages that other people don't. And the most common one that people think of is spatial reasoning.
Do you think that's why they're engineers?
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason that a lot of engineers go into it is because engineering requires spatial reasoning. But
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's not the only advantage. Like there's also spatial reasoning, being able to like take lots of different pieces of information and form like a big picture perspective. That's more my advantage. I consider myself to be average in spatial reasoning among engineers.
Among engineers,
which is my people, right? That's who I'm hanging out with. So I'm comparing with myself with them. Then there's also narrative capability and like dynamic reasoning. Like basically, dyslexic people have a better episodic memory than they do like I forget what the other one is. Like basically whether you can memorize facts versus remember experiences. Dyslexic people can remember experiences. So like if I need to like call out the capital of like, I don't know, like Croatia or something like that, like I might not be able to do it. But if I've met someone who's from the capital of Croatia, then I will be more likely to remember it. So like whenever I meet someone from like India, I always ask them like, oh, where are you from? And then I look up where that's at in the map. So like I can kind of have a face to like some region or something like that. And like I've picked up a lot more that way, just like throughout my life of like meeting people in terms of geography versus like here are the countries and memorize all their capitals. Like that's what education requires me to do. And that doesn't work for me. Like it doesn't actually might make me pass a test, but